inspired by real-life events. Narrator Rehan grew up in a quiet riverside village near Rangpur, where life felt like it was shaped more by patience than by ambition, where the river moved slowly but never stopped, and people lived the same way. Steady, repetitive, and quietly enduring whatever life brought. And from childhood, Rehan observed that nobody around him spoke about dreams as something urgent or necessary, not because they lacked them, but because survival always came first. And imagination was a luxury that had to wait. And his father worked as a small farmer, renting land from others, waking before sunrise, and returning home only when the light was already fading, his body always carrying the marks of labor, and his silence always carrying the weight of responsibility, while his mother managed the household with careful discipline, turning very little into just enough through effort that never asked for appreciation. And Rehan grew up inside this rhythm, learning early that life was not about sudden change but about continuous endurance. And in school, he was not extraordinary, not forgotten, just quietly present, sitting in the middle rows, listening more than speaking, watching more than participating, often staring at the classroom window, where the sky looked bigger than the life he knew. And that small habit slowly became something deeper as he grew older. Not just curiosity, but a quiet dissatisfaction with the idea that life must only revolve around repetition and survival. And after completing his studies, he reached a moment where life no longer felt like something happening around him, but something demanding a decision from him, because two paths appeared in front of him at the same time. One was a stable job in a nearby town with fixed salary, predictable routine, and social acceptance that came with safety, while the other was an uncertain opportunity in a startup in the city that offered nothing except instability, long hours, pressure, and the possibility of building something meaningful from nothing. And for many days, Rehan lived silently with this decision. Because every voice around him encouraged safety, every relative repeated the importance of stability, and every logical explanation supported a predictable life. But inside him, there was a quiet resistance that refused to disappear, not loud, not emotional, but persistent, like a thought that kept returning, even in silence. And one evening he sat with his father beside the riverbank, watching the water move endlessly under the fading light. And after a long silence, he asked, "Baba, what if I choose the uncertain path and lose everything?" And his father did not answer immediately, because he understood that this was not just a question about career, but about identity. And after a moment, he said, "You can recover from losing things, but you may never recover from not trying." And those words settled inside Rehan like something permanent. And after nights of internal struggle, doubt, and reflection, he finally made his decision to join the startup, stepping into a city environment that felt fast, unfamiliar, and unpredictable from the very beginning. Because the office was small, slightly disorganized, filled with young people trying to build something without fully understanding how, and nothing felt stable, not even direction itself. And in the beginning, Rehan tried to adapt quickly, working long hours, learning systems, observing everything carefully, trying to prove his worth through effort and consistency. But soon he realized that effort alone does not guarantee clarity. And there were nights when he returned to his rented room completely exhausted, sitting in silence under a dim light, staring at the ceiling fan rotating endlessly as if time itself had no destination. And during those moments, he would think about home, about his mother preparing simple meals with care, about his father working under the sun without complaint, and a strange mixture of guilt and determination would rise inside him. Because every step forward in the city felt like a step away from the life he had always known. And in the startup, he met people like Farhan Imran, Sohel Imtiaz, Sohela, Rafi, Adil Armak, Danish, Saif, Hassan, and Nihal, each carrying their own invisible struggles, each trying to turn uncertainty into something meaningful. And together, they formed a fragile team held together, not by stability, but by shared confusion, hope, and silent pressure. And often they would sit late at night, surrounded by unfinished ideas, whiteboards filled with half-developed strategies, and empty cups of tea that had long gone cold. And Imran once said with a tired smile, "If this works, people will call us visionaries. And if it fails, we will just disappear like a forgotten attempt." And they all laughed softly, but the silence that followed was heavier than the joke itself. And as months passed, the startup entered a difficult phase where funding delays began affecting salaries. Clients became inconsistent, and pressure slowly turned into an invisible weight that followed everyone everywhere. And Rehan found himself becoming more observant, more thoughtful, speaking less but analyzing more, because he realized that in unstable environments, reaction creates chaos, but observation creates direction. And during this time, his family back home also began facing subtle difficulties, especially his father, whose health slowly weakened after years of continuous labor, though he never expressed it openly. And Rehan would call home regularly, trying to sound normal, hearing reassurances that everything was fine, not realizing that those reassurances were often meant to protect him from distraction. Until one night, everything changed when his phone rang late, and his mother's voice came through trembling and unstable, saying, "Your father collapsed today." And in that instant, everything inside Rehan froze completely, because suddenly deadlines, meetings, and ambitions felt meaningless compared to the fear of losing someone who had always been his silent foundation. And he rushed back home immediately, traveling through a journey that felt longer than physical distance. And when he reached the hospital and saw his father lying weak, connected to machines, breathing slowly and irregularly, Rehan felt something inside him break in a way he could not explain, because the man he had always seen as unbreakable now looked fragile in a way he was never prepared for. And he sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice inside that single touch. And his father slowly opened his eyes and said with effort, "Don't stop your life for me. Just make it meaningful while you still have time." And those words entered Rehan like something permanent that could not be removed. And after days of uncertainty, his father's condition stabilized but never fully returned to what it once was. And Rehan went back to the city carrying a different version of himself, one that no longer saw success as ambition alone, but as responsibility. And the startup soon reached one of its most critical phases, where everything felt like it could collapse at any moment. And one rainy night, when the office was nearly empty and silence filled every corner, Rehan sat with Farhan and Imran, listening to the rain hitting the glass like a slow reminder of uncertainty. And Farhan said quietly, "Maybe this is where most people stop." And Imran replied after a pause, "Or maybe this is where people finally understand who they are." And Rehan stayed silent for a long time, feeling everything he had lived until that moment collide inside him. The struggle, the fear, the responsibility, the memory of his father, the distance from home. And then he finally spoke slowly, If we stop now, everything becomes just pain. But if we continue, even pain becomes part of something meaningful. And that night, they did not quit. Instead, they rebuilt everything from the ground up, rethinking strategies, restructuring operations, learning from mistakes instead of avoiding them. And slowly, step by step, things began to change, not suddenly, but gradually, like light returning after a long darkness. And years passed with continuous effort, and Rehan changed deeply through that journey, becoming more grounded, more patient, more aware that success is not about speed, but about endurance. And one evening, after a long day, he stood on the rooftop of the office building with Farhan and Imran beside him, watching the city lights stretch endlessly into the horizon. And Imran said quietly, "We almost gave up so many times." And Rehan replied with calm certainty, "Yes, but every time we continued, we became stronger than before." And in that moment, he understood something permanent, that life is not defined by how easy the path is, but by the decision to keep walking when the path becomes uncertain. And every hardship carries a lesson that only time reveals, and every choice shapes a future version of yourself you will one day meet with understanding. And as the wind moved across the city, he realized that true strength is not never falling, but choosing to rise again after every fall. And the real meaning of life is not found in avoiding struggle, but in transforming it into direction. Because in the end, a person is not measured by the comfort they choose, but by the resilience they build when comfort disappears. And that truth stayed with him like a quiet light that never faded, reminding him that every ending people fear is often just the beginning of finally becoming who they were always meant to be.